All right, ladies and gentlemen, the witching hour has arrived. Good evening. Thank you for coming. My name is Phil Runyon. I'll be your moderator tonight. Welcome to the deliberative session of the 2023 Peterborough Town Meeting. Let's begin as we usually do. If you'll stand, please. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, thank you again for coming tonight. Let's go over some of our rules. There aren't an awful lot of us here tonight. I wish there were a few more, but I know there are at least a couple of you who haven't been here before, so let's make sure we get on the record what procedure we'll follow. I'd appreciate it if all of your questions and comments would come through the chair here rather than being made directly among you. That'll keep the debate, I think, in an orderly fashion. We can't talk about anything unless we have a motion pending, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Everyone who has registered will have a right to speak. We'll ask you to speak once and then not to ask to speak again until everyone else has had a chance to speak the first time. The system we've used in the past seems to work pretty well. If you'll just sort of queue up behind this mic in the center of the room, we'll take you in the order that you come forward. If you're not able to get to the mic, raise your hand and we'll recognize you in the audience. We've got a long way to go tonight, quite a number of articles. There'll probably be some questions and comments on most of them. So try to make your comments, please, as succinct and to the point as you can. Very few people are better understood and more appreciated the longer they talk. So, keep that in mind. And I, put myself in the same category there, so. All right, so here's the procedure we'll follow on each of the articles that we have tonight. I'll start out by reading the article. I'll then ask whether there is a motion offered under the article. If so, we'll recognize that person, and then we'll ask whether there's a second to the motion, second by a different person than the one who made the motion in the first place. We'll then give the person who made the motion the opportunity to speak first or to designate somebody to speak for them. After the first person has spoken, we'll then open it up for questions and comments from the audience. And again, just line up there and we'll take you in the order that you come to the front. Okay, so the only thing we're going to be voting on tonight would be potential amendments. Everything else will simply be a discussion. Once we've finished with the discussion, we'll move that article to the ballot, to the written ballot that will be taken up at the polls at the community center on May the 9th. So if you feel strongly about a motion, you'll certainly want to be at the community center from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May the 9th. So back to amendments. If someone is offering an amendment on an article, it needs to be in writing. We have forms here for you to fill out to state your proposed amendment. We'll ask you to indicate your name on that so that we know who you are. And I'll go back to just a moment ago. If you are speaking, please identify yourself before you start in, and please do it each time you speak. If you speak more than once, we need to keep our records clear about who's making what points. If an amendment passes, in other words, after debate on the amendment is finished and we've voted, if the amendment passes, we will then consider the amendment as passed, the article as amended, and that one will be the article that will go forward to the ballot vote. If an amendment fails, we'll go back to the original article and continue finishing the debate on that. If there is more than one amendment, we will take those proposals and vote on them in the order they're made, but we'll only take one amendment at a time. All right, we have a procedure at town meeting, under the rules of order here called calling the question. That is an effort made to cut off debate. It's not one, though, that with the number of people we've got here tonight that I'm going to recognize until everybody has a chance to speak at least once. If there's a motion made to call the question, it does need to be seconded. It's non-debatable. It requires a 2/3 vote in order to pass. So we'll be, again, counting the votes to see whether or not it passes. If it passes, that's the end of debate, and we'll leave things where they stand at that point. If it doesn't pass, we'll continue with the discussion. Okay, because we have quite a number of articles tonight, we're not going to reconsider an article that has already been debated and passed over and sent to the official ballot later in the meeting. Some people come for particular reasons, and once they have expressed themselves or heard the debate about an article, then they need to leave, and we're not going to take up an article again later in the meeting after having dealt with it the first time. Okay, our standard tonight will be to conduct a civil discourse. We do that in honor of our longtime moderator, Walter Peterson, who was set a great example for us in that respect. So we'll count on everyone to debate the issues, but not the personalities. We've never had that as a problem in the past, and I don't expect it tonight, but that's just something that I feel the need to point out before we get going. All right, in order to get started on things, I'd like to introduce the chair of the Select Board, Tyler Ward. He'll welcome you and tell you a little bit more about what we'll be doing tonight. Tyler?
Thank you, Phil. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Very kind of you to come out. With me at the table here are fellow Select Board members Bill Taylor and Bill Kennedy. We also have Town Administrator Nicole McStay. Our Budget Committee is seated over to your left. There's Donnie Parkhurst, Rick Lesser, Mandy Sliver, Carl Mabzino, Al Lennis, Mary Clark, Ron McIntyre, and Leslie Lewis. Andrew Osterman was also on the Budget Committee and helped us out during budget season. I wanted to thank, and then over at your supervisors of the checklist are Denise Sweet, Kathy Sullivan, and Laura Norton's filling in for Carol Lennox. Town Clerk Linda Guyette's over to your right. Okay, and I do want to thank the CIP committee. Some of them aren't here. Ed Youngst, James Kelly, Leandra McDonald, James, Carl, Lindsay Dreyer, Jim Hassinger, Sarah Steinberg Heller, and Rick Lesser. As you know, the CIP committee works with all of our department heads, many of which are in the audience here, to put together the budget, and then along with the Budget Committee and the Select Board through our whole budget season. Well, should I read the agenda or hand it back to you for that?
Well, if you have anything in particular you'd like to say about the agenda, why don't you do that? Otherwise, we'll just proceed through the items as we
Yeah, there's
take
no
them up.
sense in reading the whole list more than once. Okay, thanks. Welcome, everybody.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to start with Article 3. The first two articles are about electing town officials and any zoning amendments, that kind of thing that may be proposed. Those will be on the town ballot that you'll be voting on May 9th. But the first one that we'll take up tonight is Article 3, the budget for fiscal year 2024. And it goes like this. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $14,791,950 for the support of general municipal water and wastewater operations. This represents the fiscal year 2024 budget period, July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. This article does not include appropriations in special or individual articles addressed separately. Is there a motion under the article?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. So, Tyler, who would like to speak on this?
Sure. A brief introduction. If you haven't been here before or haven't seen the process, we start at the end of summer with town administration and the select board, kind of get ideas of where we want to head with the budget, and then Nicole runs loose with the department heads, and everybody works frantically for the next several months. And there's a lot of input with the CIP committee, as I mentioned, and the budget committee, and a lot of volunteers put a lot of time into pulling this budget together. And so I think at this point I would like to hand it over to Nicole to explain where we came out this year.
Thank you. Everyone see me okay? One of these days I'm going to get a step stool built. All right, so I'm going to do something that us town administrators really hate doing. I'm going to start at the end of the process and estimate what the municipal tax rate, just the town portion, might be if all the warrant articles were to pass at town meeting as they've been presented so far. So as you can see, we have all the warrant articles, and this is all in your handout. We have all the warrant articles listed on the left-hand side of this slide. They total $10,317,246. So these are the net totals of what would need to be raised through taxation. On the right-hand side, we have possible tax impact scenarios if they all pass. And you can see that they do have an impact on the tax rate. If the selectmen were to not choose to use any fund balance to reduce the tax rate, and there was no increase to our town's assessed valuation, this is essentially a worst-case scenario. We'd be looking at an increase of $2.51 on the town's share of the tax rate. But if we had just a 10% increase to assessed valuation, which is below what our average increase is outside of a revaluation year, then we'd only be looking at an increase of $1.45. A $500,000 contribution of fund balance from the select board and a 10% increase to assessed valuation would keep us at a pretty moderate increase of just 93 cents. Again, this is an estimate, this isn't a guarantee. Please don't hold me to it if we come up with something different by the time we get to the fall. But I just wanted to make sure that we all understood exactly what the impact of what we're talking about here tonight could possibly have on your tax bill. And as Tyler said, we started this back in September of 2022. Yes, this is very tiny font, but I really didn't want this to go on to much more than one slide. And I'll go through this relatively quickly. We began the process of creating a draft fiscal year 2024 budget in September of 2022. So we're all, with especially this year, it was tough to shake up that crystal ball and actually be able to get some reasonable idea of what we were going to be looking at through the end of June of 2024. But staff went into this process looking to essentially fund services that the town is providing to you, the residents, and the taxpayers at the same level that they're being provided now. Some special consideration was given to staff retention and filling vacant positions and preparing for known retirements, and this is something I'm going to talk about at some length as we go on. Throughout the fall of 22, the staff met with the Capital Improvements Committee, who developed a forward-looking capital improvements plan that avoided debt service and leases. In November of 22, staff met with the Select Board, and we reviewed the economic conditions and set a basis for the fiscal year 24 budget. We looked at projections of our electricity costs, diesel, gasoline, all the heating fuels that the town uses. We looked at our known insurance costs and how we expect them to play out over the next year or so. And of course, we looked at what should we be considering for the cost of living and merit recommendations for our staff. And we based those on the Northeast Consumer Price Index and Social Security increases. December of 22, we had a complete draft budget that we presented to the Budget Committee and the Select Board. Throughout January and February, we met weekly with the Select Board and Budget Committee, and we moved through to our public hearing in March, and here we are today. So the form of the budget, we have budget, of course, for a community of this size is pretty complicated. We actually have a lot going on. Our proposed total budget is made up of multiple budgets, which are managed by 4 different fund types. Each are funded with a different funding source. The general fund budget, which is funded by fees and taxation and voted on at town meeting, includes all the department services you see on this slide. The water and wastewater budgets are enterprise funds. They're funded 100% by user fees, and they are included with the general fund and voted on at town meeting, but they do not require any taxation. The ambulance service budget is a revolving fund. It's funded 80% by user fees, which includes insurance and self-pay, and municipal customers, such as the towns of Hancock and Francistown and Temple and the others that buy their ambulance service from us. And it's also funded 20% by a separate warrant article, which we'll be discussing tonight, and that's voted on by you at town meeting. We presented this budget with the total budget for review, but it, as a whole, is not voted on at town meeting. The recreation budget is partially funded by the revolving fund. That is 100% funded by user fees. That includes the community center. That budget was also presented with the total budget for review, but is not voted on at town meeting. That is overseen by the Select Board. All the revolving funds are overseen by the Select Board. Then we have the Public Education Government Hub, which is the PEG Station revolving fund. That's 100% supported by Comcast franchise fees. It's presented with the total budget, but is not voted on at town meeting. And the Pay-As-You-Throw Special Revenue Fund, which is also 100% supported by the purchase of the Pay-As-You-Throw trash bags, and that is voted on at town meeting, because something's got to be different. So here are the cost drivers in our proposed total budget. And the total budget, again, is all of those different budgets, all those different funds added together. So these are the categories that are driving the increase. Mostly it's in these 3. We have the energy costs at $83,000, let's call it $84,000 altogether. Debt service, which increased by almost $90,000, and our personnel costs, which we are proposing to increase by $1.3 million. If you add all these up, the total of these increases in these categories is $1.5 million. However, the actual spending increases across all the budgets, all the different funding sources, is only $1.2 million. That right there speaks to how careful each of these department directors were when they're putting their budgets together, and how carefully they considered every increase that they put forward and looked to make what cuts that they could that wouldn't cut into the services that we're providing to you. So again, here is the total proposed budget, all those different funds, all those different funding types, but we're going to be focused from here on out primarily on that top one that I've highlighted in blue. That's the general fund. That's the one that's voted on Article 3. Take a moment, though, to talk about estimating revenues. All the revenues in the proposed budget are estimates based on what has actually been received. Our proposed budget sheets include windfall grants that we received in the FY23 budget that are not ongoing revenues. So these are grants that, for instance, we received a refund from the New Hampshire Retirement System in the amount of $26,000. You'll see that in a line called Federal and State Revenues. There's another one for $402,000 it's in a line called Town Administrative Revenues, even though I had absolutely nothing to do with it. This is the money that we received from the federal infrastructure grants that were passed. This was back in the infrastructure bill, so about 18 months ago. And $30,000 in planning and building revenues. That was a grant that Danica and the group she was working with were able to secure, and that is money that went towards downtown pedestrian enhancements and other planning. So these are revenues that were not in the FY23 budget that we presented a year ago, and so to compare between FY23 and FY24, by having those revenues in there, even though we weren't expecting them, even though they're not ongoing, they're just one-time grants, it appears that the drop-off in revenues is more dramatic than it actually is. And we have some revenues that were overstated or will not be taken this year. So they were included in the FY23 budget, but we're not actually going to be taking them. For instance, $100,000 transfer that was supposed to come from the South Peterborough TIF district for some engineering work. We have reorganized the schedule of large public works projects, and we've moved the South Peterborough TIF projects out a few years. Also, there's $50,000 in debt service contributions and donations from MCH. It's a little bit complicated. So Monadnock Community Hospital had an agreement with the town of Peterborough to build Permanently Drive, and they would pay the cost of the bond every year. This was the last year of their bond payment, so their bond payment was principal only. There was no interest. That $50,000 would have represented interest that doesn't exist, so we didn't charge them for it. So I'm not going to go too deeply into this. If you want, please take your time to go over the slide at your leisure. But this very ugly graph shows the net changes by department year over year. So it's comparing fiscal year 23 with fiscal year 24 on a department by department basis. And then below that, I highlighted some of the things that are driving those changes for each of those departments. But if you look at the bottom right corner, that's really what we're going to be talking about. It's personnel costs. Personnel costs are what's really driving the difference. So the proposed personnel costs include cost of living adjustment and merit pay. We've made some market adjustments in fiscal year 23 budget, and we need to make some more in fiscal year 24 and beyond. When I say market adjustments, that's adjustment to what the staff are currently earning today. We had to make adjustments last year and this year somewhat on the fly because we were losing staff at a very high rate. We weren't paying lifeguards enough to keep them from going to other towns to do the same work there for $2, sometimes $3 an hour more. We weren't paying our EMTs and paramedics enough, so we had to make big adjustments there. In just about every department, we had to make some kind of adjustment in order to be able to retain or attract new staff. This happened everywhere all year long. And it's something that it makes it incredibly difficult to manage a community when you're constantly filling staffing holes. And this is something that we want to try to get ahead of this year. We also had a number of retirements. Some of them we were expecting, some of them came a little bit as a surprise. And with those retirements, we had people that went from full-time to part-time, and many of those retirees that came back on a part-time basis are now looking to retire permanently, which is understandable, but that means we need to refill the position. We're not going to be able to do that at a part-time rate. We're going to need to hire full-time people to do that work. So what you'll see in this budget also are full-time positions that had been part-time in a previous budget. And health insurance costs. Whenever you have a position, an open position in the budget, you always budget as a family plan because the family plan is the biggest and most expensive possible. That's your greatest liability. And so for budgeting purposes, when we have a vacant position, we budget it assuming that the person who's going to fill it is going to take a family plan so that we're ready for that. So there's a big increase there. So we propose a 5% COLA, cost of living adjustment, and a merit increase of 3.7%, and that's been applied to all the budgets. The COLA is applied to every employee's hourly rate. Merit is assigned after the employee has been evaluated, and it is determined that if they have met or exceeded their expectations and goals, they receive the full amount that is budgeted for their merit. Any excess in the merit pool is going to be used to make market rate adjustments to hourly rates after a salary survey has been completed to help keep our positions competitive and keep our highly trained staff with us. I did a survey back in December and January of the area towns just to see what they were giving for COLA and merit this year. And so this is the results of that survey, just to give you an idea of what the others in our neighborhood are doing. And you can see that what we are considering is not at all out of line with what's being considered in other communities. And all this, again, is being driven by changes in the employee market. So post-COVID, there's a whole lot more positions out there and far fewer employees to fill them. Governments are competing with private sector for the exact same employee, and government benefits are no longer attractive enough to make up for lower hourly wages. So, for instance, it used to be that government jobs were incredibly attractive because they had health insurance, they had dental insurance, they had pensions, they had life insurance, they had all kinds of other benefits that went along with them. Well, a lot of that's changed. Now private sector jobs all offer health insurance to full-time employees. Our pensions have been reduced to the point that they're not particularly exciting to someone, particularly not to someone who's maybe in their 20s or early 30s. We also have to consider that most jobs now require a higher level of skill and certification. Regardless of what sector you're in, there is probably some level of certification for just about everyone we have. And so when this person is certified, they're worth a little bit more to not just us, not just to other governments, but also in the private sector. And to be frank, our wages simply haven't kept up. We have been very conservative in the last few years, and I think that this is unfortunately the time where we're going to have to start making some decisions about whether we want to continue offering the same level of services with the same high caliber of employee that we've had working for us all along. It's going to cost us a little bit more to do that. And so here on the right side, I have an advertisement for the Jaffrey Police Department. This is an open position that they have right now. It's a few days left if any of you want to apply. You can see that they have a great benefits package. It's equivalent to what we offer for the most part, maybe a little bit better in some of the little bits of lace on the edge of the fringes there. But just to give you an idea, so the Jaffrey Police officer is starting untrained, uncertified, at $58,000 a year. The town of Peterborough starting salary for an uncertified officer is $49,000 a year. That's a town right next door to us. We are dramatically behind. It is no wonder that we have a hard time filling and keeping our positions filled when this is the kind of competition that we're facing just next door. And I surveyed, again, a number of other communities. We have positions in Tuftonboro that start at $54,000, in Bedford at $51,000 with a $51,700 with a $10,000 sign-on bonus. Concord starts their officers at $60,000. Center Harbor, $55,000. These aren't all big communities. Some of them are small communities, and all of them are outpacing us. So the goal here is employee retention. The directive from the Select Board and the Budget Committee for years has been to do more with less. So each of our employees in every single department has been cross-trained. They are highly skilled. They can do the work of not just their own position, but someone else in their department, maybe even the work of someone in another department. For instance, most of our utilities staff are also cross-trained as truck drivers, and you'll see them out plowing snow in every storm. When it comes down to it, the more you train, the more you invest in the employees, the better they are as employees, the more valuable they are. And the employees who can do more are worth more. They save the town more. Staff has been able to replace our more expensive outside contract work. We go through a great deal of time and effort to train these employees. Keeping their wages competitive will keep them with us. And when the employees do leave, competitive wages will attract new employees to fill their positions. So in summary, this budget proposal is the response to a changing economy. The costs to provide the same services at the same level have gone up. The three categories of spending that have driven most of the increase, but they're not the only areas where costs have gone up. For instance, supplies in just about every single department have gone up because the cost of transporting those supplies to us, to the stores where we buy them, has also gone up. The bottom of a lot of our contracts now, and then probably if you own a business, you're seeing this too, there's now a delivery surcharge fee on just about every invoice, particularly for larger pieces of equipment. This is in response to the cost of diesel having gone up. Directors have carefully considered their budgets. They've minimized those increases the best that they can without cutting services. There have also been significant changes in the employment market, which require more resources to retain and attract staff. And funding succession planning is necessary to ensure a smooth transition and continuity of services. Our part-time retirees have left or are leaving, and positions are being converted back to full-time. And our Capital Improvement Plan Committee has recommended a robust funding schedule to avoid future bonding and leasing, and that allows for smoothing of the year-to-year appropriation of funds for large capital purchases. You're going to be seeing that in the future in the other warrant articles we'll be discussing tonight. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, a lot to absorb there. Are there questions, comments that anyone would like to make on either the presentation that Nicole gave or on the figures in general? Yes, sir. Would you step up to the microphone, please?
My name is Leo Smith. I live on Summer Street here in Peterborough. A couple things. One is I want to compliment the Select Board, all of the various committees, Budget Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, and the directors for the town to putting together a very comprehensive budget. I had a chance to review it, and I think it's, anyway, I think it's a job well done. The other thing, the question I have is that I know that there's been struggles with the ambulance revolving fund, in terms of how much money does the town need to spend to keep the ambulance revolving fund going? Because back in years ago, it was like, well, whatever we got from the transfer business would offset the other expenses for the regular ambulance, so that it would be a net zero. But my question is that are we looking at all possibilities for grants, particularly in the fire rescue area, because there is a lot of money out there, with FEMA and even at the state level and that kind of thing. So I'm just asking that question.
Nicole, would you like to respond to that?
We're always looking for grants, always. We've taken advantage of as many of the grants as we've been able to, particularly the post-COVID grants. So we had the revenue recovery grant. I'm trying to remember exactly what the state and local Recovery or Rescue Act funds.
Yes.
And we use that, to cover some of the ambulance services portion of the cost of looking at the new fire station, for instance.
Okay.
Because that was an open-ended grant. So that's something that town meeting did in a prior year. We've had some money that came from CMS, which is the Center for Medicaid Medicare Services. That money went directly into the ambulance services revolving fund to help cover some of the costs of staffing. And we're always looking for more grants that may be available to help, whether it's with purchasing equipment for the station itself, purchasing equipment for fire rescue. The Fire Rescue Association also does fundraising every year to buy equipment that helps to defer some of the cost, not only for our local taxpayers and patients, but also the other communities that purchase their ambulance service from us. And there's a whole list of alternative revenues that we are always looking to maximize.
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. And if you see anyone sees a grant that you think we should look into, by all means, send me an email.
I've talked to Mr. Taylor about that.
Yep.
But anyway, there are monies that are out there, and it's a challenge to go and find it, because sometimes they're buried in some other different appropriation, especially at the federal level.
Yes, yeah, those are the hardest ones to sometimes uncover and then apply for. And it's all a matter of whether or not we qualify too. That's the other issue, is making sure that we meet their qualifications.
Yeah, because a lot of the funding for some of this with some of these programs will be at smaller population levels, smaller income levels, 5,000, median income 43, 45 kind of thing.
Right.
There's the ones that really get the opportunity to get money, But anyway, you just got to keep looking at it. So anyway,
When we do. Yep.
Just thought I'd bring it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Pardon me? Bill?
I just wanted to personally thank all the members of our budget committee and the work that they've done in the CIP. I've been through this process, and it's amazing the amount of time and energy people put into this, so thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, seeing none, we will move the budget to the ballot for consideration on May the 9th. You'll have a chance to vote on it there as proposed. If it does not pass at the ballot voting on the 9th, it will be brought back up and considered at the meeting on the 10th. So we can either deal with it on the 9th or we'll be dealing with it again on the 10th. All right, we will move on to Article number 4. This one is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $131,000 for the purpose of operating and maintaining the town's pay-as-you-throw program, with said funds to come from pay-as-you-throw special revenue fund and no additional funds to be raised through taxation. Is there a motion under Article 4?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Taylor. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Bill Kennedy. So, pardon me? So, thank you. All right, Bill, would you like to speak?
No, I don't know that this one needs a whole bunch of explanation. This is the blue bags that you buy and throw your trash out in.
That's exactly it. Yep.
Think we want to beat that one to death, or?
And all the related expenses that go along with that. So those blue bags pay for the cost of hauling the trash. It also pays for the maintenance of the compactor and a few other things that go along with it.
All right, are we all set there? Are there comments or questions about that? Tyler?
And where can we find those bags to purchase?
Nature's Green Grocer. I believe they're at Agway, Bell Tate's, and Shaw's. Thank you. I knew there was one more.
All right, comments or questions? Now you know where to get them. All right, seeing none, we will move Article 4 to the ballot as well for voting on May the 9th. And we'll move to Article 5. This one is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $764,700 to be placed in the following previously established capital reserve and expendable trust funds. $18,500 to be placed in the GIS Capital Reserve Fund. $80,000 to be placed in the Police Department Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund. $210,000 for Fire Department Apparatus and Equipment Capital Reserve Fund. $1,200 to be placed in the Winter Operations Expendable Trust Fund. $375,000 to be placed in the Fleet Management Capital Reserve Fund. $65,000 to be placed in the Recreation Department Equipment Capital Reserve Fund. And $15,000 to be placed in the Adams Pool Improvement Capital Reserve Fund. Is there a motion under Article 5?
Motion to.
All right, motion by Mr. Kennedy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Taylor. So, Bill, would you like to speak on this one?
It's pretty straightforward. What we're doing is putting aside money to pay for our expenses as they're coming up. We don't want to be taking out loans, and this is going to address it. did you want to say something?
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sue Shute. I'm just curious, do these refer to any specific costs that you know that are coming up, or this is just kind of in general?
Yes, these are all related to specific expenditures. Each of the department directors works with the CIP committee every year. They've put forward what they know are going to need to be replaced. As, for instance, let's say a pickup truck. We have a pickup truck that we know will need to be replaced in 5 years. That goes into the schedule along with all the rest of the trucks and whatever else the other departments will need to upgrade, replace, what have you. All that get worked into the schedule so that we're trying to raise and appropriate a very smooth amount of money over the next 10 years or so.
Other questions, comments? Yes, yes, ma'am.
Shelley Gogan-Hilbert, Old Jaffrey Road. Does that mean that we will expect to see about this same amount of money for the next 10 years each year?
More or less. So if you look at the slide that I have up right now, and you'll have that in your handout, this is what we're going to be asking for. If you look at the bottom, the total of all the CIP warrant articles for the next few years is listed there. So you can see that, you know, there is some increases because we expect that there's going to be some increases in costs, some larger purchases coming up, but it stays relatively level as you go forward.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Carol Kraus, Cowley's Common, Peterborough. I wanted to know if any thought was given when you invest funds that they are in a socially responsible way.
Yes. The select board has required that all the funds that are invested are also rated. So there's, I'm trying to remember exactly what the acronym stands for, but there's an environmental, social, and there's a, yes. So there's a rating that the trustees of the trust funds look at as they're considering the investments. And you can see that annually in the trustee of the trust funds minutes. There's a copy of that. And if you'd like to see that, we have it on file downstairs in the administration office. I'm happy to get it for you.
So an addendum to that would be, are there any like fossil fuels companies, that you invest in?
Off the top of my head, I'm sure there are. Do I know which ones? Not particularly. And do I know how much is invested in each of those? No, not particularly. You'd have to take a look through the minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm
You're
glad
welcome.
you're considering it anyway.
Yes.
All right. Any others? Yes, sir. Anyone who hasn't spoken already? Okay, yes. Come on up.
Leo Smith again from Summer Street. I was just going to ask a question about the fire department apparatus capital. Is $210,000 enough? I mean, I know it's spread out over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 years, and then a big bump in FY 2030. I was just, just knowing how expensive that equipment is, I just wanted to find out how comfortable everyone felt with the $210,000.
It was unanimously voted forward from out of CIP, and the Budget Committee and the Select Board also approved of it unanimously. So I think everyone's pretty comfortable that it's going to meet the goal. It will be adjusted annually if it needs to be adjusted. Of course, nothing here is fixed in stone. It's many years out.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, if it needs to be tweaked, it will be.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Other comments? Other questions? I don't see any other hands. So we will move Article 5 to the official ballot as it was presented tonight. Under Article 6, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 to be placed in the previously established Roadway System Upgrades Capital Reserve Fund. Is there a motion under Article 6?
So moved.
All right, moved by Mr. Ward and seconded by
Bill Taylor.
Bill Taylor. All right, so Kyler, would you like to speak here?
Sure. May I see a show of hands from people who live on a road with potholes? Anyone? Okay, not so many. Enough. Well, this is your article right here. We're several years into this now. Seth McLean, deputy or assistant town administrator and Department of Public Works director, this was his vision, and it's come to fruition and in the midst of it. And would Nicole or Seth like to explain it further? Okay, Seth, welcome. How many people live on a smooth road? Oh, almost as many. This is.
How many people that raised their hand live on Pine Street? It's been the running joke. So anyway, thank you. My name's Seth McLean, and I'm pleased to present Article 6, which seeks to fund the 6th year of a 10-year plan for the rehabilitation of roads in Peterborough. So a lot of you didn't raise your hands, but a lot of you probably had your roads paved over the last 6 years as well, because we have invested nearly $2 million so far in bringing some of the roads up to snuff. So this program specifically seeks to fund, program focuses on funding degraded roads in the community where the cost to repave or rehabilitate would have otherwise strained the town's annual budget. So I'll keep it very brief because Mr. Taylor doesn't like when I belabor this particular article. In any case, this program was started 7 years ago, where the town staff partnered with an engineering firm to develop a roadway inventory, rating system, and capital budgeting tool to allow us to make informed empirical decisions on the usage of available funding, as well as develop a long-term capital plan for rehabilitating roads, especially those in the rural sections that had gone unfunded for many, many years, of which there are still some. 7.5 years ago, the Select Board, Budget Committee, and the CIP Committee challenged the staff to, one, address the failing roads around town in a fiscally responsible manner, and two, determine whether or not the town's operating budget would be sufficient to support those needs. Sorry, I'm forgetting the slides, which you can't read anyway, so it's probably irrelevant. The findings of our roadway program, after our inventory was complete, were that the town's overall road rating, RSR rating, or road surface rating, was a 70.45 on a scale of 0 to 100. We developed that by going out in the field and actually rating each basically foot of roadway in every road across town using a standard engineering principle in order to develop that rating. That backlog, the backlog of more costly repair work, second point to this, would be approximately $4 million, which is how this program came about, in order to bring roads back up to snuff. And that if the additional $4 million was raised and appropriated, that our operating budget of $450,000, which we've already considered tonight in Article 3, would be sufficient to hold our rating in place. And so we achieved our objectives at that time that the Select Board, Budget Committee, and others had asked us to do. Since the program's construction phase began in 2018, we've raised the roadway network's overall rating by nearly 10 points, from a 70.45 to an 80.18. We've paved 32 roads with this funding while being able to simultaneously spend the operating budget portion of our monies on less costly treatment techniques such as chip sealing, shimming, crack sealing, as well as taking care of many drainage and other maintenance considerations for the roadways. In other words, allowing our annual budget, our operating budget, to keep our good roads in good shape while using our warrant article to fund roads that are more costly to repair. Each spring, the staff reassesses and rates the entire road network, and from there determine paving priorities. The plan always intended to see the completion of the Main Street Bridge before moving into the downtown area, and with that project now complete, the downtown has become the priority for the remainder of this program. To that, we've also saved $372,000, which is still in this expendable trust that you're considering, for upcoming costly pavement projects in the downtown, as there is related infrastructure connected to the roads in the downtown that we don't see in the rural section, so the cost to actually repave those goes up. These include roads like Pine Street, which we are targeting this coming year, Main Street, Grove Street, and Elm, following the upcoming bridge rehabilitation work for Grove and Elm Street bridges in the coming years. Summer Street, and obviously others in the downtown area, as well as a few sections of the rural network as well. Again, Article 6 seeks to fund the sixth construction year of a 10-year plan to completely rehabilitate Peterborough's roadway network. It focuses on roads needing heavier financial commitment for rehabilitation, including reclaiming and repaving, and in doing so allows our operating budget to support less costly maintenance activities to keep good roads in good shape. I appreciate your consideration. I'll take questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Anna Carter. I live on Middle Hancock Road. I always thought Pine Street was so awful for so long because the residents wanted it that way to keep them through traffic. But what I wanted to say was, I don't see anything about Middle Hancock Road on here, which is okay. Most of Middle Hancock Road isn't awful. It's not great, but it's not awful. The last half a mile or so going into Hancock, there was like a huge flooding rainstorm in the late 90s that washed out all the culverts on that last half mile of Middle Hancock Road. And before that flood, the pavement was like 6 inches thick from years and years and years of chip sealing and oiling and sanding and stuff like that. After they got done, they put on an inch of asphalt. And it keeps breaking down because there's nothing underneath it but sand. And so every winter, every big rainstorm, you get holes again. And you've been patching it and patching it and patching it, and it's rough. It's really bad now. So at some point, you probably need to think about just like digging up the whole road and completely rebuilding it and putting down a good solid base and enough asphalt to make it last.
Thank you.
Doesn't that mean the Hancock people from coming into Peterborough?
And unfortunately, not enough to keep them from going 50 miles an hour.
We won't include that comment in minutes. All right, any other comments here? Questions? If you are lobbying for particular road improvements, there's the man. So, all right. Seeing no other comments, we'll again move Article 6 to the official ballot and vote on it on May 9th. On Article 7, it's stated to see if the town will authorize the establishment of an expendable trust fund pursuant to RSA 31:19A to be known as the Upper Hall Expendable Trust Fund for the purpose of retaining funds for the orderly repair and upkeep of the upper hall of the Peterborough Townhouse and its associated spaces, and to designate the Select Board as agents to expend, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,000 from the unrestricted fund balance. No amount to be raised through taxation. Is there a motion under Article 7?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Taylor and seconded by?
Seconded by Mr. Kennedy.
By Mr. Kennedy. All right.
May I make a comment?
You may.
Look around and look down. This hall is beautiful right now. I've seen it a lot worse. So this kind of funds will help maintain this environment.
Any other questions, comments?
I can speak.
Tyler.
I was on the job site today. I'm a carpenter, and the painter showed up, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, Todd, I painted the townhouse." And he had this sense of pride that he had done this, and I don't think he lives. Does he live in Peterborough, Matt? Yeah.
Hancock.
Yeah.
We let him come from Hancock.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He went the round. Maybe. Yeah.
All right. Any other comments? Questions?
If I can just say briefly.
Sure.
They already took the words out of my mouth. This really is The hope is to use some of the funds that we collect as fees for rental of the upper hall to maintain the upper hall. So it does get a lot of use. It gets a lot of use from concerts. We have weddings up here, birthday parties. Of course, when the primary circus comes to town, they hold a lot of those events up here as well. And of course, we're all here. Contra dance, yes, and there's so many. You can't really name all the events that we do up here. All of them pay some level of rent, with the exception of us, because we would be charging ourselves for it. But they all pay some level of rent to be in this space. I'd like to be able to start saving some of the money that we collect from fees to keep this up. They did do a tremendous job, and every time I come up here now, I just remark on how gorgeous it is. When you think about, if you can remember back to before COVID, the last time you were in this room, it was looking pretty sad and dingy. I used to always say if we needed help trying to raise money to redo the upper hall, all I had to do was ask everyone to stand up, take one step to the left, listen to that creak, take another step back to the right, and sit back down again, and I think I would have gotten a yes vote. So fortunately, it never came to that, and we managed to get the work done. I just want to keep it up. So this will seek to raise no additional funds from taxation, and I think it's really pretty straightforward.
All right. Any questions or comments about this one? Yes, ma'am.
Marie Primo from Westridge Drive. I'd like to know if at some point you will consider the entryway to this hall to provide accessibility, because it is impossible to push a wheelchair up that ramp and open the door out to get the wheelchair in. Thank you.
We're always trying to find ways to improve the accessible access to this building. It's very challenging because we have very limited space. Straight out that back door, of course, we have the sidewalk to one side and the building to the other and a drop-off. So it's a bit of a challenge to find a way to really improve that. One of our other challenges is that because this is on the National Register of Historic Places, we cannot alter the exterior, the appearance of the exterior building. So we can't make any changes to the exterior walls or anything like that. It all has to look the same. The windows have to be the same. The doors have to be the same. Even the roof we had to replace with slate because it can't be any different than what it was when it was put on the Register of Historic Places. So there's a lot of challenges, but we are always trying to make improvements. We tried to make some improvements to make for instance, the front access is now wheelchair accessible, where the front door never was before. There was always a step there. So we are trying to make incremental improvements where we can, when we can afford to do so.
All right. Anyone else, please? I don't see any other hands. We'll move Article 7 to the official ballot for May the 9th. Under Article 8, it's stated to see if the town will authorize the establishment of an expendable trust fund pursuant to RSA 31:19A to be known as the, quote, Bridges, Culverts, and Dams Expendable Trust Fund, unquote, for the purpose of retaining funds for the orderly repair, replacement, and upkeep of existing bridges, culverts, and dams, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $237,830 to come from the proceeds of the unanticipated bridge aid accepted by the Select Board at a public hearing held on December 20, 2022, to be used for this purpose. No amount to be raised through taxation. Is there a motion under Article 8?
Motion to approve.
All right, by Mr. Kennedy, and a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ward. So, Bill, would you like to speak?
From what I understand, this is essentially a bank account that we need to establish in order to not only expend the funds that we have, but also to expend funds that we're getting in order to repair the various bridges and culverts and so on in the town.
So these are funds that, again, came from the federal infrastructure bill about 18 or so months ago. They finally trickled down to us through the state of New Hampshire. And we'd like to be able to retain those funds because bridges, culverts, and dams are some of the most expensive pieces of infrastructure that we have out there to replace. when it comes to replacing a road, I think Seth will tell you just about any other piece of the road is relatively inexpensive except for those feet that you have to go over a piece of water. So we're looking to save this money, and we'll be hoping to save money again in the future, as you saw through that capital improvement plan snapshot, into this fund to help us continue to replace them, maintain them, and hopefully keep our roads open.
Comments? Questions? Yes.
Sally Ennigus, Old Dublin Road. Quick question. Does this need to be amended to reflect anything about adding culverts to replace culverts that have been previously removed and later found to be some flooding or some runoff problems, or other roads where culverts have been removed? Because many culverts were removed in some big road projects done back in the 90s.
Nicole?
So if we were to want to use these funds to build new culverts, is that?
To replace culverts that had historically been there but had been removed in a earlier road project?
Yes.
To save money?
Yes, we would have to, if we were to look to use these funds, we would need to amend the language to essentially to create a culvert that isn't there, to build a culvert that's not currently existing.
But would a simple amendment be to replace culverts that had been historically present but had been removed?
This language, I don't believe would go, for those historic culverts that no longer exist. No, I don't believe that this language as it's written would do that.
Should it be amended to, could, if it were amended to have that language, could that cover it for accepting the funds that are becoming available?
I'm sorry. What I'm really hung up on is trying to remember what the language of the money that the selectmen accepted, if there's any restrictions on whether or not it was for new or if it was for existing maintenance. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what the language was. If you could give me a minute.
Are you looking something up there, Nicole? Okay. Any other comments, though, while Nicole is looking at that issue? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Loretta Laurinaitis. I'm just wondering if any of the TIF districts will also be expected to add money into this particular fund. And it sounds like this is based on an amount of funding that you have available now, but I do know that, like the South Peterborough TIF has a number of bridges that they've identified as needing to be replaced. So is there any thought about using TIF money at times to add into this fund?
I can answer that. For example, what you're talking about in the South Peterborough TIF district, there are a number of bridges and culverts, and I don't know about dams, but there's probably a dam also. And they have been identified to be paid for in those specific areas out of the TIF district, and this would be separate or in addition to that, not specific to South Peterborough. So to answer your question, no, we wouldn't be adding to this fund from TIF districts. Any money from the TIF, any work that is getting done in any specific TIF district would either be paid directly from the TIF district, or this fund would be in addition if there wasn't enough money to pay for it out of the TIF district. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I guess I'm wondering if this particular fund shouldn't be earmarked for ones that are not TIF districts, because I'm sure there are other bridges and dams and things that need work in town and are not part of TIF districts. So I'm just wondering if it would be kind of geared more towards those kinds of projects.
You mean the language of it?
No, I just
I
mean
mean,
the
it is, this is in addition to anything that's in a specific TIF district already. So we're establishing this to do work on culverts, bridges, and dams. Say, for instance, if something happens or needs to be repaired in West Peterborough after that TIF district is sunsetted, we're establishing a fund now based on what we know will be needed to be repaired.
Okay, so basically, not currently, but if in the future, those districts had something that was needed
Right.
attention. Thanks.
So just to follow up on
Yep, go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. On the previous question, there is nothing in Senate Bill 401 which would restrict us from using it to build a new bridge, culvert, or culvert.
All right. Pardon me?
So if you wanted to build something new, you would have to amend it to say, to allow that, yes. There would have to be proposed language to add in the wording to allow for new construction of new bridges, culverts, or dams.
Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Sarah Steinberg Heller. I would just, if we were going to bring in the idea of new ones and like historically, I would like to define what historically means because that's a huge brush. I'm just a little bit concerned about what that means given I'm on the CIP committee and just given the amount of time and effort that went into building this concept, I would want to see historically be defined as a concept broader than just the word alone. Because there's so many things that are already existing that need attention.
Nicole, any comment on that? No? All right, I'll just point out that the term historically does not appear in the article itself. Okay. So, are you offering an amendment?
I think I need to write.
You do.
I want to write something, and I'm not talking about historically. There's no reason to put a culvert in if it's not needed, or to repair a dam that's not needed. But historical does not have any relevance to.
All right. Well, do you have specific wording that you'd like to amend this article with?
Just say.
Well, you need to.
Retaining funds for the orderly repair, replacement, building, and upkeep. Just adding the word building.
Okay. Well, would you like to write that for us? Any other comments while this amendment is being put together?
Has everyone noticed that all the light bulbs are working?
Actually, I just noticed tonight that there's a couple of them out.
I'd like to amend my statement.
You're all welcome to volunteer to go up and change them if you'd like.
I'm not changing any one of those, not even for 5,000 bucks.
All right, so it's moved to amend this article to replace the language about what happens with with bridges, culverts, and dams, to say, for the purpose of retaining funds for the orderly repair, replacement, building, and upkeep of existing bridges, culverts, and dams, etc. So the motion is to add building into the motion, into the article after replacement. All right. Is there a second to the motion to amend? All right. It's seconded back there by Sue Shute. Okay. All right. So is there anything further you'd like to say about that, Sally, about the...
I'm not sure if that's the best place to put the word in the building, though, but I just think that we don't know what the future holds, and if we need to fix some leak or we have too much excess water, we'll be able to divert it.
Well, is there anyone who didn't hear that who wants that repeated up at the microphone? Okay. Would you step up, please? I'm sorry. Just want to make sure everybody's well aware of what we're...
I just wanted to put a word in that would allow us to do things in the future to divert water as we're trying to fix our infrastructure with these funds that are being some federal allocation for them. Correct?
All right. Thank you. You need to sign this, if you would, please.
Right, I know we have to vote on that since the motion's been seconded, but perhaps, I mean, we would need to strike the word existing if we're talking about building, and maybe instead of saying building, we could say construction.
So do you accept that amendment to the motion? All right, so the amended motion to amend would be for the orderly repair, replacement, construction, and upkeep of bridges, culverts, and dams. So the word existing has been proposed to be removed, and construction would be added to allow for new culverts to be put in. Are we clear? Is there a second to the amended motion? Okay, second over here. Any further discussion about the motion to amend? Is there anything that anyone would like to say about the proposed amendment? For, against, explanatory, etc. Seth?
Keep it very brief. It's a challenging task to maintain the infrastructure in the community, and I would certainly support any flexibility with warrant articles, such as the proposed language here.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we do need to vote whether or not to adopt this amendment. So if you're in favor of the amendment as proposed, please raise your paddles. All right. Thank you. If you're opposed to the amendment, raise your paddles. Looks like unanimous support for the motion. We'll declare that the motion to amend is adopted, and the article will go forward on the ballot with that language changed. All right, so we'll move to Article 9 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $450,834 to be placed in the Ambulance Service Revolving Fund. This amount represents the town of Peterborough's share of the cost to operate the 911 emergency response ambulance service for the calendar year 2023. Is there a motion under Article 9?
So moved.
All right, by Mr. Ward. Is there a second?
Second by Bill.
All right, by Bill Kennedy. So Tyler, would you like to speak on this?
I think Nicole or Chief are here to fill us in.
Want to? I can do it. I can do it.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Chief.
All right, thank you. So a little history here. The town of Peterborough is providing ambulance service to some surrounding communities since 1972. In 2015, we changed our formula for the allocation of those funds to those communities to include capital costs, liability costs for the town of Peterborough, as well as administrative fee. The $450,834 represented in this special warrant article is the town's portion of that allocated cost. So the formula that we use to establish this dollar amount is the same formula that is applied to all of the communities we serve. Currently, it is Dublin, Hancock, Temple, Francistown, and Hancock. And it takes into account the operating cost of the 911 ambulance service, our reimbursements through insurance charges, and this is the allocated portion of that delta. Do you have the, look at that, there we go, next slide up there. There we go. Too many cooks. So we look at the service that we have. So the 911 emergency service represents 55% of our expenditures roughly and 45% of our revenues. And our interfacility patient transfers is about 45% of our expenditures and 55% of our revenues. As Mr. Smith brought up earlier, there was a long period of time where the revenues or reimbursements for the ambulance service were sufficient to cover that operating cost, or what Peterborough's allocated share of that was. Over the past several years, the ambulance reimbursements have gone from somewhere over 55% to below 50% for the dollars billed. There was a member of the budget committee 2 years ago, I can't remember the member it was, in a previous lifetime had done some work with the ambulance services, and he actually said, you know, ambulance is one of the few bills you send out as a vendor never expecting to get paid. And that's really sort of where we are, their ambulance service. So in order to keep the fund, the revolving fund sufficiently funded, we moved 2 years ago to a plan where we're asking the voters in Peterborough to pay their full allocated share of that delta between the expenditures and the revenues for that. The last slide that we have here is a look at demonstrating what our fund balance has been over the last 3 years. So if you look at fiscal year 2020, our revenues, expenditures, and then the balance left in the fund balance. For those of you with short-term memory problems, 2020 was a remarkable year. COVID started. So we had a significant decrease actually in our call volume without really an increase in our costs, because, like as Nicole pointed out earlier, the majority of our costs are personnel. And we had our personnel there ready to serve the population and do that. 21, we started to recover a little bit from that, but not a whole lot in terms of our revenues. And through 22 and 23, we've made some changes. The select board voted at the beginning of this year to increase ambulance fees to match the increase from CMS, which was almost 8%. And looking at that, and this has started to get us into a position where we can ensure that this revolving fund stays a solvent fund to provide the ambulance service, again, not only to Peterborough, but to the other surrounding communities that we serve.
Any questions for the chief before he sits back down? Yes. Yep, up to the mic if you would, please.
Leo Smith. Quick question on the 451,000. What's kind of like the potential inflationary impact that might have going forward in the future? I mean, you know, obviously you have expense issues, but also, you know, the challenges with the medical reimbursement system. I mean, if you look at it, is that something that we have to look at every year in some respects?
Yes, so this is an actual live number, if you will.
Okay.
We usually refer to as the attachment A, which is an attachment to the contract for service, the intermunicipal agreement we have with those other towns.
Yeah.
And Peterborough is one of those lines for that. The formula is based upon town population as well as call volume, and those call volumes fluctuate every single year. So as we look at this annually, there will be this sort of change in numbers. And again, it's based on the percentage of population isn't a huge change, but the percentage of calls that the Peterborough residents have versus the towns that we serve. Traditionally, Peterborough is over 50% of the call volume, and we also represent over 50% of the population within those six communities.
So going forward, this will be an article that will come up.
Correct.
Okay.
Under statute, in order to move money into the revolving fund, it has to be a separate warrant article, as opposed to lumping it in with the other trust fund articles.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Other comments, questions? Chief, thank you. We'll move Article 9 to the official ballot as proposed, and move to Article 10, which reads as follows: to see if the town will authorize the establishment of a capital reserve fund pursuant to RSA Chapter 35 to be known as the, quote, Facilities and Grounds Capital Reserve Fund, unquote, for the purpose of retaining funds for the orderly repair, replacement, and upkeep of existing facilities and buildings, and to designate the Select Board as agents to expend. Is there a motion under Article 10?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Taylor and seconded by
Seconded, yes.
Tyler Ward. Okay. Bill, would you like to speak there? All right, Nicole.
Thank you. So this is seeking just to establish a fund. We're not actually looking to fund it yet because the Capital Improvements Committee would like an opportunity to take a look at all of our facilities and grounds. What buildings are going to need work in the near future, what bits of our parks, what bits of our parking lots, what have you, are going to need maintenance and improvement. By establishing this fund, we'll be able to include it with the article that has all the other, the funding of the other articles. In the future, we'll work that into our capital improvement plan.
All right, questions? Comments? Yes, sir.
Hey, Leo, why don't you sit closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Leo Smith, just a real quick question. Any projections on what this might look like? In terms of the Capital Improvement Committee going forward? I know that you want to establish the reserve, but any sense what that might look like? Or you won't know until you've done the appropriate analysis, I guess?
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, just asking. Can't help myself.
Yep.
Okay, other questions, comments? We're doing pretty well here. We'll move on to we'll move Article 10 to the official ballot for May 9th. We'll move on to Article 11 to see if the town will vote to amend the annual terms of compensation for the elected supervisors of the checklist as follows. Supervisor of the checklist from $2,250 to $3,000 in regular election year, or $4,000 in an election year that includes state or federal elections, plus $1,000 in the year that the voter list purge occurs once every 10 years. There are 3 elected supervisors of the checklist. This provision is for each supervisor of the checklist, and furthermore, to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,250 as the cost associated with this warrant article for fiscal year 2024. Is there a motion under Article 11?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy and seconded by
Second.
Mr. Taylor. So go ahead, please.
You want to? It's been a long time since we've adjusted salaries and benefits for our elected town officials. We considered it for the select board and others, members of the community, but we felt that the checklist were the ones most deserving of this. When was the last time we actually adjusted salaries?
Bill, speak up a little bit if you could, please.
Oh, sorry.
I think maybe people are having a hard time hearing.
So
Maybe
Bill,
that's just me.
Bill had asked me when was the last time we adjusted the stipends for the elected officials. And this, I was actually, on another question, I was asked to look back and find the warrant article that established the stipends and benefits for another elected official. And when I got as far back as 1986 looking for any elected official stipend, I stopped looking. I'm not entirely sure when the last time the town of Peterborough adjusted the stipends for any of these elected officials. So it's well overdue, especially the supervisors of the checklist who, as you know, spend many, many, many long hours, not just at the polling places, but also updating and correcting the checklist and accounting for all the new registrants after the day of voting. It's an incredible amount of work, and they certainly have earned every penny of this.
Okay, questions, comments before we move this one on? Don't see any hands. We'll move this one to the official ballot for voting on May 9th. And we'll go on to Article 12 to see if the town will vote to amend the terms of compensation for the elected town clerk as follows. A newly elected town clerk shall begin service with a salary level equal to the minimum executive salary structure grade level 6, and benefits including health insurance, dental insurance, pension, life insurance, short-term and long-term disability insurance, and Social Security. After the completion of each year of service, the town clerk shall receive a salary increase equal to the cost of living adjustment, COLA, increase approved at the prior town meeting. Where applicable, all provisions of this warrant article shall be afforded the current town clerk. Is there a motion under Article 12?
So moved.
Moved by Tyler Ward. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bill Taylor. Who would like to speak?
I'm sure Nicole can articulate the reasoning for this best. Yeah.
So when that question was asked of me, can you find the warrant article, this is what they're actually referring to. They're looking for a warrant article that showed when the town clerk started receiving benefits, including health insurance, dental insurance, pension, and so forth. Couldn't find one when I went as far back as 1986. So it's really incumbent to continue to providing those benefits to a town clerk that we adopt them. So that's what this warrant article seeks to do. It seeks to essentially set the basis for every elected town clerk, current and future town clerks, what the town will be essentially contracting to raise and appropriate in terms of not just their salary, which is currently within the town's executive salary structure at grade level 6, but also all the benefits as well as salary increases and so forth.
Yes, ma'am.
Sue Shute. So are you saying that prior to now, there's not been any health benefits or dental or anything like that?
No, the town clerk has been receiving all these things all along for decades now, near as I can tell. But I can't see where town meeting officially adopted those benefits for the town clerk. So what we're looking to do is correct that record.
To basically codify that
Exactly, the past
it's already
practice.
happening.
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
So, Linda, you may have to give back. Okay, so I don't dare, I don't think. Okay, so any other comments on Article 12? We'll move that one to the official ballot on May 9th. We'll move on to Article 13, a related article, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $8,297 to award the current town clerk a cost of living adjustment and merit-based salary increase and pay all associated increases to taxes and benefits. Is there a motion under Article 13?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Bill Kennedy. So, Bill?
Yeah, I can probably do this pretty quick. You think? This basically establishes that the current town clerk will get the same salary and merit increase as every other employee. But since she's an elected town clerk, it has to be voted on. That's it.
All right, questions, comments on this one? All right, if none, then we'll move this one on to the official ballot as well. Moving to Article 14, to see if the town will vote to designate the following town-owned properties located off of Greenfield Road as a town forest pursuant to RSA 31:110. Parcel ID number U008-034-100, taken by tax deed in 1993. Parcel ID number U008-034-200, taken by tax deed in 1993. Parcel ID number U008-034-300, taken by tax deed in 1993. And further, to authorize the Conservation Commission to manage the property in accordance with RSA 31:112, and to authorize the placement of any proceeds that may accrue from forest management in the Conservation Commission account to accumulate pursuant to RSA 31:113. Once established, the town forest cannot be abolished in whole or in part without a 2/3 vote of town meeting. Is there a motion under Article 14?
So moved.
Moved by Bill Kennedy. Is second?
Second.
Second by Tyler Ward. So who would like to speak on this one?
Francie?
Maybe someone could identify where these parcels are located.
So these parcels are all located off of Greenfield Road. You've got a nice big picture of them with a locus map to show you where that is in town. Very close to the part of town where Greenfield Road splits off with Old Greenfield Road. They were formerly known as the sawmill properties. They were taken because there was a sawmill on it once upon a time. They were taken by tax deed as stated in 1993 and have long been considered for conservation as they are adjacent to other conserved lands, which adds to a wildlife corridor that exists. And any questions on that, I will certainly defer to Francie, who is the expert on this.
Francie?
Francie Von Mertens, Conservation Commission. A town forest, well, it's not that prescriptive, just a little background. A town forest, the conversation we've had on the Conservation Commission is, it'd be cool to have a town forest. It doesn't mean, these days, a forest management plan doesn't necessarily mean cutting timber. It can be wildlife, it can be a number of things. The Conservation Commission in the past, not recently, has had traditional forestry operations on 3 different properties in town: the Fremont Field land, the Walcott land out beyond the recycling center, and then the Raymond Trail going up to Temple Mountain. And that was mature forest. This is a young forest. Swift Corwin, as I think most of you know, is a forester on the Conservation Commission, and he's gone out there and assessed it. So we thought it would be great to have a town forest. How actively we will manage it, I don't know. There's a lovely brook, Dunbar Brook, that goes through Sheeling Forest, flows down there. You can see on the aerial.
Questions or comments on this one? Tyler.
How shall we name said forest?
I have a great idea. How about Peterborough Town Forest?
Yes, ma'am. Would you step up, please?
I think Sarah Steinberg Keller, I think Peterborough Town Forest would be totally legit. But I also think it would be kind of cool, and obviously I'm extremely biased, to name it the Bill Chatfield Forest, who is our former postmaster and passed away last year. That could be a cool idea. Maybe we could partner with the Peterborough Poetry Project, his project to place little poems throughout the forest. It's an idea. I won't be offended if people aren't into it, but that is my suggestion.
Is this naming issue one that requires any kind of official action from the town? No. Town council is shaking his head no. All right. Any other questions or comments on this one? We will move Article 14 to the town ballot to be voted on May 9th, and we will move on to Article 15 to see if the town will vote to readopt the optional veterans tax credit for an annual tax credit on residential property of $750 per year in accordance with RSA 72:28, Roman numeral 2. If the credit is not readopted, it will reset to the $50 per year minimum. Is there a motion under Article 15?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Ward and seconded by?
Seconded.
By Bill Kennedy. So, Tyler, would you like to speak on this one?
I don't think there's anything to discuss about that.
All right. So, just for my benefit, are we saying essentially that unless this was adopted, that the annual credit would revert to $50 per year? I see. Okay.
Yes.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move Article 15 also to the official ballot. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to readopt the, no, sorry. Yep, Article 16, is this a different, okay. To see if the town will vote to readopt the all veterans tax credit for an annual tax credit on residential property of $750 per year in accordance with RSA 72:28-B. If the credit is not readopted, it will reset to the $50 per year minimum. Is there a motion under Article 16?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Taylor and seconded by?
Second.
Tyler Ward. So, Bill?
That's also self-explanatory, and I'm certainly not going to speak out against readopting that.
So the optional veterans tax credit is a tax credit that is offered to veterans who fought or who served the country during wartime. The all veterans credit is offered to any veteran who served the country, regardless of whether or not it was wartime. These need to be readopted because both of the underlying RSAs that enable these credits was revised in the last legislative year. And so if we don't readopt them, they will automatically reset.
All right. Other questions about this or comments? All right. Yes, ma'am.
Stephanie Hurley. I feel that the difference needs to be clarified because nobody here really understood it. And it just seems like it should be explained because optional doesn't really say that they fought in a war. all veterans tax credit. If you're a veteran, you're a veteran. So I don't think this is clear enough.
So we didn't actually write the warrant article language. This is language that was written by the Department of Revenue Administration. By using the language that they drafted, we are guaranteed that they will find that language acceptable.
Yes, ma'am?
Could you, I mean, I don't have a, we could also say optional and then in parentheses, wartime veterans, you know, to clarify? No?
No, we can't do that.
Okay.
So, Nicole, are you saying that this is the language that needs to be adopted in order to approve this?
That's correct.
Yes, go ahead.
Sandy B. Best. I'm just a little confused. It seems to me that Article 16 applies to all veterans. Article 15 only applies to veterans who fought in a war. Does that mean that veterans who fought in a war would get 2 tax credits equal to $1,500?
No, they do not.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yes, ma'am.
So if Article 6, Nancy, West Street, 22 Winter Street. If Article 16 applies to all veterans, why do we also need 15? Couldn't you just have 16, period?
This allows a veteran to apply to whichever credit they feel best fits them. So these are state forms that get filled out. They're not actually we manage them, but it's a state process, and the veteran will go through a form that is, to be quite honest, not the easiest form to understand. We'll check a box, where they think it's applicable, provide their documents that prove that they are who they are, that they own the property they say they own, that they're the resident of Peterborough, and they'll also provide documentation which proves their service record. So this is really by adopting both of them, by having both of them on the books, it makes it easier for the veterans.
Ma'am, would you just state your name again for our...
Nancy West Street, 22 Winter Street.
Thank you. All right, other questions or comments about this one? All right, again, we'll move this one to the official town ballot for voting on May 9th. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to revise the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District to include the following parcels. So bear with me on this one. R003-037-000, R003-019-000, R003-017-000, R003-016-000, R003-018-100, R003-018-000, R003-025-500, R003-025-101, R003-025-100, R003-025-722, R003-020-000, R003-022-000, R003-025-300, R003-025-400, R003-025-200, R003-025-701, R003-025-600, R003-024-000, and further, to move parcels U022-035-000 from the Greater Downtown Tax Increment Finance District to the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District. All right, is there a motion under Article 17?
So moved.
All right, moved by Bill Kennedy and seconded by...
I'll second that,
Right.
and that was, almost wanted to sing along for a while.
Yeah, well, I was getting into a little rhythm
It's
there.
good
Thank
stuff.
you. Yeah, it's about as much singing as I'm capable of. So, Bill, second by you?
That's right.
All right, so who would like to speak on this one?
I'll just simply mention that the intention of this particular article is to capture properties into the South Peterborough TIF so we can benefit from expansion in that area and expand the services that are allowed. The machinations of TIF districting and the taxes involved in it are very complicated, and I believe Nicole is prepared to address it.
You don't want to do it, Bill? No one else wants to run up here and explain TIF districts? No.
Okay, questions or comments on this one?
No, I do have a little presentation
ahead.
to go
Yes,
here.
go
so
ahead, please.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm going to try to simplify this as best I can because TIFs are an amazing government financing tool, but they are complicated. So this particular TIF district, the South Peterborough TIF district, was established by vote of special town meeting in October of 2017 to fund infrastructure improvements in South Peterborough that were described in the South Peterborough TIF district plan. People who live and work or own businesses within the South Peterborough TIF district area are on the TIF District Advisory Committee, and they have identified a number of other improvements, which, along with the public infrastructure, will make living in South Peterborough a better place. Will make it more walkable and more vibrant for both residents and the businesses. So adding these properties into the South Peterborough TIF district will provide enough incremental taxation to fund not only the infrastructure and the other identified, but also other identified improvements that without requiring a bond or raising tax dollars from outside the district. They would be entirely self-funded. So a little background on how TIF districts work, and this is the part I'm going to try to keep simple, but it is pretty complicated. So first, let's establish how tax rates are calculated, which I'm sure most of you already know, because if you're here, you're pretty dedicated to local government. So what happens is we take the total amount, the net needed to be raised from the governmental budgets, which includes the town, the school, the county, and the state. We then divide that by the total valuation of the town, and that gives us our tax rate. It's a very simple formula. After that, the property bill is then calculated by multiplying the tax rate by every $1,000 of property value of a given property. So as an example, and you'll see this in the slide, if we had a $300,000 house and we multiplied its value by the 22 tax rate, their annual tax bill will be $7,758. So how does the tax increment finance district work? You take those same budgets and you divide that by the total valuation, which includes any pre-TIF assessed value of the property. So when you create a TIF district, you're taking the assessed value of all the properties within that district, you're capturing that, and you're saying this is the amount that's not going to be included in the TIF district. That is the base amount that continues to be taxed in the exact same way, at the exact same rate as the rest of the properties in the town. And that the funds from that continue to go towards your regular governmental funding. They go towards the school, they go towards the town, they go towards the county at the same rates that they always have. But if there is incremental value added to the properties in the district after the moment that the TIF district was created, that incremental value is still taxed at the same rate as every other property in town, but that the tax dollars generated from that taxation stay within the TIF district. They go into a separate fund, and they can only be used for the purposes identified in the TIF plan. So here's what that looks like. I also want to say that there's a typo on this page that I didn't catch until I walked into this room, and it was brought to my attention. If you can find it, you get brownie points. So we take that same $300,000 home that existed when the TIF district was created. We do that same calculation. We take the home's value per thousand, we multiply that by the tax rate. That gives you the annual tax bill. That amount on the existing $300,000 of value still goes to fund the town, the school, the county, and the state. Now let's imagine that after the TIF district was created, that homeowner decided to build an addition onto the property which is valued at $50,000. So we take the incremental value of that property per $1,000, multiply that by the tax rate, and you get $1,288. That's the incremental taxation. That's what goes into the TIF fund. That's what's used to pay for all the TIF improvements. Everyone, does that make sense? Is that clear? Good. Okay, so properties within the TIF district continue to be valued as they've always been valued. Taxes continue to be calculated as they've always been calculated. And projects within the district are funded with TIF funds derived from the incremental taxation collected on improvements made to properties within the district. So what are the benefits of a TIF district? They improve, they really help us achieve all the townwide goals that we have in terms of maintaining and improving infrastructure, making neighborhoods in our community more walkable, and so on. The local dollars go to local purposes. All the funds needed within the TIF district for the TIF district projects are raised by the TIF district property taxes. And because of that, we're able to fund projects more quickly, especially when we're able to establish TIF districts ahead of when we know construction's coming. For instance, we established this TIF district in 2017 by special town meeting because we knew that Rivermead was planning a large expansion. And so far, it has done an enormous job funding the TIF district. That and the Church Street development is all within the TIF district. So we're getting quite a bit of funding already from those. It reduces the debt service burden on all taxpayers because we're raising enough money within the district to fund those. We don't necessarily have to take out bonds, and when we do take out the bonds, they can be paid for by the TIF district. That's what we did in West Peterborough. It was incredibly successful. That TIF district was so successful it was able to pay off the bond years ahead of schedule. And the composition of the TIF board, which is dictated by statute, provides local perspective on the TIF-defined projects. The people who live and work within the TIF district are the ones that decide what gets done there. So here's just an overview of our current TIF districts and the projects that are in front of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but if we focus again on South Peterborough, we have quite a few projects that we're planning on doing there. In the hot pink, you see the parcels that Phil so deliberately read through that we're looking to add into the district. In the light peachy pink color, that's the existing South Peterborough TIF district properties. And in the blue that you see towards the top there, that is the southern edge of the downtown TIF district. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in the South Peterborough TIF district. We have 2 bridges that need to be refurbished. We have one bridge that is too far gone to actually carry vehicles again. That's the one at Noon Falls. They're looking to convert that for pedestrian use, and we also need it to carry a water main. So again, some work needs to be done there to make sure that it's safe and continues to support that water main. We have culverts, sorry, I'm getting tired. We have culverts that are in jeopardy of failure, and there's a lot of water and sewer infrastructure that we need to do to support our currently proposed and future affordable housing projects in the South Peterborough TIF districts. So in total, we estimate that the cost of all of these projects together will be $15.5 million. We believe that that can be adequately funded by the South Peterborough TIF district with the addition of these properties at no additional cost to the general taxpayer and without any bonding whatsoever. And that's it. Any questions?
All right, so yes. Go ahead.
I just have a quick question, not knowing the numbers of all the ones that you read off. In lay terms, can those properties be described of what's being added?
Well, I think
I'm having a hard time.
Nicole was pointing out that they're the ones shown in pink there
Right, I
along
understand
Route
that.
202.
But does that, for instance, does that include the microspec and stuff like that? Okay.
Nicole, did you hear that question?
I didn't, I'm sorry.
I was just in lay terms, not rather than all the property numbers and letters. What areas do the pink areas, I was asking, does that include microspec? What areas are those actually including, just for known?
Yep, so the large bright pink property you see at the top there of the map, that is the former sand pit that is being converted. Is it Microspec that bought it? Thank you. That bought it. They're going to be expanding into that property and also proposing to build housing there, including affordable housing. There are a lot of other commercial properties as you move south along Route 202 that also have some proposed work that's being done. So it's quite a few things that are coming forward through the planning process or have already moved into the planning process that make this a really good time to add these parcels in. And the town attorney just brought a proposed amendment or a suggested amendment to my attention.
All right. Do we have that?
I'll write it in.
While she's doing that, I wanted to mention, Sue, that you can go online to the Peterborough website, and if you search for the Geographical Information System, or GIS, you could look up those lots and see it, from bird's eye view. I'd also like to mention that it is under the auspices of the Economic Development Authority that we have in town here that ultimately approves or bring forward to the select board these kinds of proposals. But even underlying that, there are advisory committees for each one of these TIFs that have to make proposals and bring it to the EDA, which then brings it to the select board. The reason I'm mentioning that is that they're all volunteer committees.
You want to sign?
And it would be great if we could get people to sign up and participate in these.
All right, there's a motion been submitted by Nicole McStay to amend the motion under Article 17 as follows: to see if the town will vote to revise the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District to include these additional parcels. Not just the following parcels, but these additional parcels. All right. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ward. Nicole, do you want to speak as to why this is an amendment that you'd like to offer?
Yeah, so the change in wording is to add clarity to the warrant article to make it clear that this isn't seeking to replace the parcels that are already within the TIF district, but to add these parcels into the TIF district with the existing parcels.
All right, so is everyone clear about what the purpose of the proposed amendment is? All right, any other comments or questions about it before we vote? So again, if you're in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your paddles. If you're opposed, please raise your paddles. Looks like a unanimous vote in favor of the amendment. So the motion under Article 17 as amended will go forward to be voted on May the 9th. All right, thank you. And then last, but by no, yes.
Can I make comments on this?
I didn't see your hand up, ma'am. Go ahead, yes. I'd be happy for you to do that.
I thought I'd have to wait until after the amendment was voted on. too.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay.
Go
I'm
ahead.
Loretta Laurinaitis, and I actually have some misgivings about this article. And part of it has to do with the fact that I think that last sentence is not accurate, and it's misleading for the voter, because it implies that all of parcel U022-035-000, which is the Solera property, and it's approximately 111 acres, that all of it is being moved from the greater downtown tax increment district, but it's not. There's only 10 acres of that property that is currently in the greater downtown tax increment finance district. So I think it's misleading to leave it as it's written, because the voters will assume it's already in a tax increment district. They're just moving it over, but that's not the case. So I have concerns about that.
All right, so Nicole, is there something you might say about that?
So there's a little bit of history here. Formerly the Solera property, now owned by Microspect, was before the sale multiple parcels. That one 10-acre the 10-acre portion of that now many hundred-acre parcel was separately in the greater downtown TIF district. Before the sale, all the properties were merged together. All those parcels owned by Mike and Marcia Solera were merged together into a single parcel and then sold. But that left us with an inconsistency within the parcel. So you had the 10 acres that continues to be in the greater downtown TIF district, and then you have the balance, which is outside of any TIF district at the moment, but is looking to be included in the South Peterborough TIF district. That creates, in effect, an assessing nightmare, because you have a small piece that needs to be somehow, you know that we're going to have more construction there, so you're going to be creating all this additional value that will spread across the entire parcel, but then somehow the assessors are going to have to try to figure out how to break it up and move some of that incremental value into one of the TIF districts and more of the incremental value into the other TIF district. By unifying it all, by putting it all into a single TIF district, it really avoids unnecessary complication.
I understand that. What I don't understand is leaving it under the impression that the whole 100 acres, 100 plus acres are in the greater downtown TIF. Why not include that parcel in the list of parcels and say, and 10 acres of this property will be moved from the greater downtown TIF district? I mean, that's a more accurate representation of what you're doing.
It's certainly an amendment that this body could consider if you wanted to offer it.
So I'd have to offer an amendment on that. It's not something that could be done with our attorney present to write that in a correct way.
The only body that can rewrite a warrant article is this body tonight by amendment.
Right, I understand that, but you already did one of them, and you said it was from our attorney. So I'm saying, why can't our attorney write an amendment for this?
Well, you're the one who thinks that an amendment needs to be made. So, as a taxpayer and a resident of Peterborough, I offered the amendment, not the town attorney. So it was a suggestion that had come from him because he believed that there needed to be some clarification. So I made the amendment. I put it forward as a resident of Peterborough.
Okay, so I could write an amendment with that. I have a couple of other comments about this. And one is that with the taxes, my understanding is that the tax increment value does go to the TIF district, but when people are taxed each year, usually school taxes, county taxes go up. Those then are, it doesn't sound to me as though those extra school and county taxes get taken out.
They do. So that tax rate formula changes every year based on the budgets that are presented by each of those governments.
Right, but in your example, it had like 25%, and it of the $300,000 one, it didn't seem like it was taking that into account. So that was my question about that. And I guess my other concern is that I want to be assured that TIF districts are really spending the money wisely and for important projects, because I was a little disturbed to read in the EDA minutes that one of the TIF districts was spending $8,250 for 3 trash cans and $6,000 for 2 picnic tables. I mean, that seems pretty exorbitant to me. So I can understand infrastructure costs, but I can't understand things like that. It just seems like they're spending money to spend money because they want to do it, rather than it's something really being a need for the town. So that was my other comment.
Okay, so this is the slide that I believe she was referring to, the $300,000 home plus the $50,000 addition that was constructed after the TIF district. In this example, this shows the current tax year, and at the current tax rate, how much would be captured by the TIF district. This is an amount that would change every year based on the changing in the tax rate. So that is the portion of the formula that would change, that would keep up with the increased costs that need to be raised for the school or the county, should their budgets be higher, or the town for that matter. With regards to the cost of the trash cans and park benches, it's not simply a matter of buying trash cans and park benches, but they need to sit on concrete platforms that they can be bolted into in many cases so they don't get thrown into rivers. Some of those come along with other amenities. So there is an increased cost to buying anything that goes into a park if you plan for it to be there for many years.
All right, we're working on an amendment here. Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Gloria Anderson from Peterborough. Just a question for general information. Are there any other TIF districts anticipated? How do they come into existence? And if these areas were not added to the TIF, would the incremental taxes would just go into the town general fund? Is that correct?
So yes, we do have other TIF districts. We have currently the Greater Downtown TIF District and the West Peterborough TIF District. The West Peterborough TIF District will be sunsetting soon. It has reached more or less its end of life. We've got a handful of projects left to complete out there, which should be getting done this year, and then that one will be ended. The funds from that will be proposed probably at next town meeting to go into an expendable trust fund that will be able to draw on to maintain the infrastructure that was built under the TIF plan when it existed. The Greater Downtown TIF District is still in operation and was extended at the same town meeting as the South Peterborough TIF District was created. It's still got quite a bit of work ahead of it, and that's a very active project right now. The funds, to the second part of your question, what would happen to the funds that would be generated by these improvements? Yes, they would go into the general fund. What would typically happen is that because our school district raises its funds through a blended formula which takes into account not just the student population of the entire district and how many of those students come from each town, but also the property value of each town in the district. By not capturing it within the TIF district, all of that increased value, instead of being used for projects within the TIF district, will instead go into that formula for apportioning out the school budget, which means that the town of Peterborough would pay a larger share of the school budget which would reduce the amount of money that we would have available to complete these projects. So by capturing it within the TIF district, you guarantee that that money can stay there. It's not shorting the school in any way. We're still paying our share of their budget, but we're paying it at the same level in comparison to the other communities that we are currently paying it at. And we'll do that through the life of the TIF district. By capturing within TIF district, again, we're accruing that money very quickly, so we're able to complete these infrastructure projects within, we'll probably be able to do it within 10 years of starting. It may take a little bit longer just because there's so many projects out there to do, in which case we would come back and look to extend the life of the TIF district. But this allows us to complete these projects without having to bond, without looking to increase general taxation, to add money into the projects fund. We're able to do it with the money raised there. Is that clear? Okay, good.
I had a question while we're waiting for Town Attorney Radigan. Do you see any need to amend this warrant article? You do not. Yeah.
So the proposed amendment here to this article is to change the wording of the final paragraph. Can we get that article back up? All right, you see the final paragraph that says, and further, the proposal is to change the wording of that to read, and further to move U022-035-000 into list of properties.
What I would do is I would move the parcel number just in with the whole list of properties, and then in parentheses say 10 acres.
You said 11 acres here.
11 acres.
All right, so the proposal is in that last paragraph there to make clear that it's only 11 acres of U-022-035-000 that would be moved from the Greater Downtown Tax Increment Finance District to the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District? Okay, so do you understand the proposed amendment? 11 acres of the parcel that's referred to there, not the entire parcel. And
Now, the entire parcel can be moved, but the problem is that only 11 acres of that parcel are in the greater downtown TIF. I was just asking for that to be clear.
so is the proposal that the entire parcel be moved into the new TIF district, into the South Peterborough TIF district?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. Including the 11 acres from greater downtown TIF.
All right, so it's only 11 acres from the Greater Downtown TIF district that would be moved because the rest of it is not in the Greater Peterborough TIF district. Okay, so are we clear about what the proposal is? The entire parcel would be included in the South Peterborough TIF district, but only 11 acres of the parcel is presently included in the Greater Peterborough TIF district. Okay.
And that's 11 acres
Okay? Pardon me? All right, so it's proposed that the amendment would be, and further, to move U022-035-000 into the list of properties to be,
Just put it in the list as one of the properties.
to put in the list. You see the list of all of the properties? It would be included in that list, including the 11 acres of it that are now in the greater downtown TIF district. Are we clear about that? Yes, ma'am.
So is that U0223500, is that the entire 100+ acres?
That would be added to the South Peterborough TIF district.
That is the entire.
Yes, but only 11 acres of that is part of the greater Peterborough TIF district.
I would say, yeah, move that, including the 11 acres that are currently part of the greater downtown.
That's what the motion says. Is there a second to the motion? Is there a second? You're seconding. Your name, ma'am? All right, any more discussion or comment or question about this?
One comment.
Pardon me?
I do have a comment.
Go ahead.
When we asked the town attorney what he thought about it, so for the voting public, the town attorney has weighed in on this. I think that makes it more confusing, the amendment, but that's just my opinion.
Why did the town attorney say that he's against this?
I asked advice.
Why?
Well, sir, would you like to say something? If you'd like to make a comment, please step up to the microphone. Your name, sir?
David Bonacci from Four Winds Road. You just commented that the town attorney said that he did not agree with this. You referenced the town attorney. I think we should hear from the town attorney why he would not approve of this change. He said something like it would be confusing, but I would appreciate if he'd elaborate a bit more. He is the town attorney and is paid to be specific about his recommendations.
Sure. To be clear, I asked him if he would recommend changing the original wording, and he said he did not. And he's more than welcome to speak if he chooses.
John, do you want to add something just to make sure everybody's clear about what your position is on this?
Good evening, everyone. John Radigan. The wording is fine because at the time that this land went into the Greater Downtown Tax Increment Finance District, it was not the size of the parcel today. It was a much smaller size. And so what we're saying here is, because the parcel is much larger and we want the entirety of the parcel to go into the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District, the wording says to move the parcel from the Greater Downtown Tax District. So that's whatever portion is in it. But the parcel is then going to go in its entirety into the South Peterborough Tax District. And so that's quite clear what the drafter of the ordinance meant, and it makes sense.
Yes, come on up, ma'am.
Stephanie Hurley. I do think I agree that it is clearer if we make the change, and the way I read it, and maybe, I don't know if it will be clearer to other people, but to me it did become clearer to say, and further, to move parcel U to the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District, which includes 11 acres from the Greater Downtown TIF district. And I think it is important to have that clarified, that it wasn't the whole parcel, because now the parcel's changed, and I think just saying that makes it clearer, but that's my opinion.
All right, so just, again, just to be clear, as I understand the proposed amendment, it's to include this entire parcel in the South Peterborough TIF district, of which 11 acres is currently in the Greater Peterborough TIF district. So that although the entire parcel is being included in this TIF district, only 11 acres is moving from one TIF district to the other. You're nodding. Is that the correct interpretation? All right. So we've had a second to the motion. Is there any further discussion or question about it? And the proposal is for the to move parcel U-022-035-000 into the list of the other parcels that are being added to the South Peterborough TIF district, of which 11 acres are now in the Greater Downtown TIF district. Okay, everybody clear about that? Any more comment or question? Tyler?
Can we confirm it's exactly 11 acres, not 10.7, or that's, if we're getting this technical, we should know the exact parcel size? Anybody?
It says 11 acres. Are you willing to accept an amendment that would say about 11 acres or approximately 11 acres? Is there a second to that amendment?
Including the portion currently in
All right. So rather than referring to a specific acreage, just referring to the portion thereof that's currently in the Greater Peterborough, Greater Downtown Peterborough TIF district. All right, so that's the proposed amendment then at this point, without reference to a specific acreage of property in the Greater Downtown TIF district, simply to refer to the portion of the property that is in the Greater Downtown TIF district. Okay, are we clear? Yes, sir, back there. I can't hear you. Would you step up here, please?
Sure. Carl Resnick, Concord Street.
Nope. Come on up.
Yep.
Come on up.
My question is...
State your name for us.
Yeah, sure. Carl Bresvik, Concord Street. My question is that one portion to become number 19 in the list, or is it going to still be in the and further sentence?
No, it's going to be included. The proposal is to include it in the list of all those other parcels.
Which makes it sound as if the entirety of that parcel is finding its way from wherever into the TIF district.
No, well, that's not the proposal. The proposal is to include the entire parcel, whatever the total acreage of that parcel is, in the South Peterborough TIF district.
Correct me, please. I'm sorry, but the 18 that are listed there are presently not in the South Peterborough TIF district, correct?
That's the way I understand it.
So if you take that one parcel and include it with the others, you're saying that it wasn't at all in the southern TIF district, and now all of it will be. None of it was, and all of it will be. Is
That's
that correct?
Yes.
So none of it presently is. All right, thank you.
Okay. And I so that the parcel would be added to the list of parcels that are up there. And the last paragraph would then read, and further, to move the entire parcel U-22-035-000, including the portion thereof, in the Greater Downtown Tax Increment Finance District to the South Peterborough Tax Increment Finance District.
Sarah Steinberg-Heller. Can we call the question? I feel like we've are beating a dead horse, and people can vote for it if they want it and not if they don't want it.
All right, well, there's a motion to call the question. Is there a second? All right, this is a 2/3 motion. It's non-debatable. John, do you have a point of order here?
Just the last reading that you did, taking out the word from, so you start by saying the entire parcel is moved in. I think that's a good amendment. Now.
All right, thank you. All right, so we've got the motion to call the question. This requires a 2/3 vote. If you're in favor of calling the question and moving to a vote on the amendment, please raise your paddles. If you're opposed to calling the question, raise your paddles. All right, that looks distinctly in the affirmative, unanimously in the affirmative. So we will move to a vote on the proposed amendment as I read it a few minutes ago. Are we clear what we're voting on? All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your paddles. If you're opposed to the proposed amendment, raise your paddles. All right, it looks like it's distinctly in the affirmative. That doesn't require a 2/3 vote. I'll declare that the amendment is adopted, and the amendment, the article as amended, will go forward to the official ballot. All right, our final article tonight, Article 18, is a long one, so bear with me on this one. To see it, to see if the town will vote to revise the charter of the Advisory Budget Committee as follows. Mission statement, : the Peterborough Advisory Budget Committee, hereinafter, quote, Budget Committee, unquote, close parenthesis, mission is to provide the community, the select board, and the town administration with independent review and objective analysis of the proposed annual town budget. The Budget Committee assists voters in the prudent appropriation of public funds by recommending whether to accept the proposed annual budget so as to meet the present and future needs of the town. Paragraph A. The Peterborough Budget Committee shall be composed of 9 members, elected to 3-year terms. If a member resigns before his or her term expires, a replacement member shall be appointed to serve until the next town meeting ballot session, at which time the voters will elect a replacement to fill the resignee's term pursuant to RSA :32:15, Roman numeral 7, per RSA 669:71. Paragraph B, the 9 elected members shall, on an annual basis, elect a chairperson, vice chairperson, and a secretary from among themselves. Paragraph C, a quorum of 5 members is required for the Budget Committee to conduct a meeting. Paragraph D, to allow time for appropriate review, the Budget Committee should be informed when possible of any matter requiring its attention 30 days prior to any initial town meeting session, but no less than 2 weeks prior to said meeting. In order to allow the Budget Committee sufficient time to evaluate and advise on the upcoming budget, the department heads shall present a budget requesting for the ensuing year to the Budget Committee no later than March 15 of each year, and the town administrator shall present a final budget proposal before the Budget Committee votes on its recommendation to town voters. Paragraph E, it shall be the duty of the Budget Committee to, (1) explain at each town meeting the tax impact of monies authorized by ballot or proposed for consideration at town meeting. 2, review and evaluate warrant articles based on short and long-term financial ramifications and make recommendations to the town administration pertaining to same. 3, withhold recommendations to voters only if there is insufficient information for making a recommendation. 4, report on the ballot the votes among Budget Committee members on whether to support, not support, recuse, or abstain for all ballot items and on all items at town meeting that would authorize raising and appropriating monies. The position of individual Budget Committee members will not be reported to voters unless solicited from the floor at town meeting. F, the Select Board, the Budget Committee, and department heads shall be required to work cooperatively with each other as far as practicable to ensure that the budgetary process is undertaken in a manner to best serve the community's needs. Paragraph G, the Select Board and the Budget Committee shall meet jointly to evaluate the recommendations of the department heads and to discuss, where warranted, any budgetary matters related to the upcoming budget. Subsequent to the presentation of the final budget request by the town administrator, the Select Board and the Budget Committee will meet in joint session to record their recommendations to voters. Paragraph 8H, being a public body, the Budget Committee is subject to the right to know law, RSA:91, and is required to conduct all of its meetings in a manner which is open to the public, post notice of its meetings, keep minutes of its meetings, and have those minutes available for public inspection in the Select Board's office within 6 days of its meetings, or take any other action relating thereto. All right, is there a motion under Article 18?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ward and seconded by
Second.
by Bill Taylor. Who would like to speak about this one?
Sure. I do know that the Budget Committee spent a fair amount of time working this out, and right now I'd like to hand it over to the Budget Committee Chair, Carl Mabzino. He can articulate their work.
Thank you, Tyler. First, I have to thank everyone who did stay for staying so long. I won't try to go through the whole thing, but I will mention that the last time this charter was approved by the town was 1993. And we looked at it this year and realized that it does not describe what we do or what we think we ought to be doing. So the new version is mostly the old version with some changes to make sure that it adopts what we think we ought to be doing. The main difference is that in the old version, it says that the Budget Committee and the Select Board will make their separate recommendations, report them in writing, and make them available before the town meeting. What we've been doing for some years is that we sit down together and eventually come to some agreement and make our recommendations. Not necessarily agreement, we just make the recommendations that you always see. So what this does is it says that the current process will go the same process that goes forward. The other change was because there's some confusion about what an advisory committee is, this being an advisory committee, we put in a mission statement. Some people hear that this is an advisory committee and they say, so you don't have any power. We have the power to advise. It's not meaningless. If you saw on that ballot that the Budget Committee voted 9-0 against something, you might worry a little bit more about voting for it. So if you look at the mission statement, which has just been read to you, you'll see a statement on what we think we are doing and why we think that's meaningful.
All right, any other comments or questions about the proposal, the long one I read there? I hope you've had time to read it yourselves before we make a decision about whether to move it forward. Any questions or comments? All right, well, seeing none, I'm sorry, Tyler.
I would like to make a comment, but not specific to this article. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, and we've heard many great ideas and questions, and it's all being captured. Tim Bresvik's over here on the video, and Cooper Leaf has done our sound tonight to make sure we have good sound on the video. So if you need to refer back, the video will be available to watch. Thanks.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of our business. Let me say, though, before we go, just officially, that we will move Article 18 to the ballot for voting in person on Tuesday, May the 9th. So this is your chance to declare yourselves privately, once and for all, as to whether you want to adopt the articles that have been moved to that ballot. When you vote there at the community center between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. that day, we will then decide on May 10th, here again in this session, in the open session of town meeting, on the remaining items that are up for consideration at that time. Are those in the handouts that, okay. All right, so they are in the handout. You'll just need to look to see what those, I think there are only 3 articles. They're all petition articles. Those will be brought up at the open town meeting, as well as the budget if it shouldn't pass at the voting on May the 9th. Okay? Well, thank you all for coming this evening and for your attention and concern about all these issues. We'll see you at the polls on May the 9th and then back here on May the 10th. And if you've got your ballot, your yellow cards, there's a box right over here to include those in, and there's one in the back. So please recycle those and we'll use them again. Thank you all. Good night.